This is a video about anger or being angry. It covers a lot of information, so I recommend that you start and stop the video while you think about each part. I'm going to start by saying that anger is a very noticeable emotion, especially when it's full strength, and not just to ourselves when we're experiencing it. It's an emotion that's designed to make others take notice, especially when it's fired up. It can be a really helpful emotion because it motivates us to change things that aren't right. It can be helpful if we learn to manage it well. But I'm going to start by asking you to shut your eyes and imagine someone really angry. What do you see? I asked you to imagine an angry person because when many people imagine someone being angry, they actually picture someone being aggressive. In other words, someone being violent, shouting, throwing things or damaging property. Is that what you pictured? Well, the first thing I want to say is being angry is an emotion. Being aggressive is a behaviour, and generally we have more control over our behaviour than we have over our emotions, but I will talk about that a bit more later in this video. There are people who hardly ever get aggressive when they become angry. Some people only get aggressive on rare occasions when they are really angry. Most people tend not to show their anger as aggression because they know that this would make other people feel uncomfortable. It might make themselves look a bit foolish, and it rarely sorts anything out. Some people, however, really struggle not to behave aggressively when they are angry. Becoming angry really easily and/or becoming aggressive very quickly are the problems people usually have if they have a problem managing their anger. Anger is a normal part of being a human being, like all emotions. We evolved it to give us a surge of energy when we felt threatened, especially by other people, so that we could become aggressive and warn them off. It's the emotion that we evolved to protect ourselves. However, nowadays we rarely have reason to protect ourselves physically like our ancestors did all those years ago. Most of the time we really don't need aggression, even though we do all get angry every now and then. These are all words to describe being angry. If the words are next to the red part of the anger thermometer, they are words that can be used to describe being really angry. As you go down the thermometer, the words alongside it are words that describe being less and less angry. The words next to the green part of the anger thermometer are feeling words for not feeling angry at all. How many of these words do you already know? You'll need to stop the video to answer that question. Anger is an emotion that can take over our whole bodies, as hormones like adrenaline and cortisol are released into our blood to make our bodies ready for action. Like I said before, we used to need that call to action or ability to respond aggressively when we lived in a world that was quite different to how it is now, when we lived in a less safe world. Nowadays, if we respond aggressively when we're feeling angry, it's usually totally inappropriate. But that can sometimes be a bit hard when we look at the physical reactions and sensations our bodies experience when we're feeling angry. When we're angry, we can experience a lot of different physical reactions and sensations. Now, as you can imagine, we use up a lot of energy when we're angry, so thankfully it doesn't usually last too long. Or if it feels like it's lasted a long time, it's usually because it has been triggered repeatedly or over and over again. The symptoms we feel can be quite noticeable, and they can include squinting our eyes, breathing more quickly, our heart beating more quickly, our tummy feeling churned up, our muscles tensing, gritting our teeth, our face going red or really pale, or clenching our fists. So what kind of things can trigger us to become angry? Well, we can become angry if something's really irritating or annoying us. Say, for example, if we're really trying to concentrate and somebody keeps making loads of noise. We can become angry if something costs us. So that can be the money kind of cost. Say if somebody broke our bag and we had to buy a new one. Or it can be a different type of cost, like a loss of face. So we might lose face if somebody was teasing us in front of other people about how rubbish our work was, for example. And we can also become angry if somebody does something that we consider is wrong. like somebody pushing in front of us in a queue. Anger is triggered for different reasons in different people. What triggers one person to become angry won't necessarily trigger everyone to become angry. Also, when something happens, even though everyone experienced the same thing, it can trigger different reactions in different people. Generally, we become angry when someone has pushed at our boundaries, in other words, done something unacceptable to us, something that threatens our safety, our sense of fairness, comfort, or sense of well-being. It's usually a message to ourselves that something needs to be stopped, sorted out, or understood better. How angry do you think each of the following possible triggers would make you? Some of these might not make you angry at all, of course. So think about someone deliberately ignoring you, trying to do a calculation in maths and getting it wrong every time, someone deliberately breaking your pencil, someone laughing at a picture that you had just painted, someone lying to you, telling you that they'd lost your football that you lent them when they hadn't, getting told off by a teacher for something you didn't do, someone copying your work, or someone not listening to you when you're really trying to tell them something. Something that can help us deal with anger is to notice what we're thinking when anger's been triggered. Emotions are affected by what we think. So the way that we think about a situation that triggered our anger can actually make us angrier, or it can help cool our anger down. This is an example of 3 different thoughts you could have in response to exactly the same thing happening, that of someone insulting you. Think about which of these thoughts would make you more angry and which less so. When you're angry, it always helps to try really hard to understand what's going on for any other person involved, if there is someone else involved. This can help us understand the situation better and help us quite often to see that what's going on is not just about how we feel. We can sometimes end up angry because we haven't fully understood the situation or have jumped to conclusions. Asking questions and finding out more information usually helps us with this. So what are the different ways of expressing anger? Well, like I said earlier, some people assume that somebody's not angry unless they're expressing it aggressively. And if somebody is being aggressive, chances are they are angry. But people can express anger without becoming aggressive. Aggression generally makes situations worse and doesn't sort anything out. So if you are somebody who becomes aggressive quite often when you're angry, if you learn to manage that, your life will definitely become more easy. It's during the first 6 seconds of being angry that you will feel the strongest urge to become aggressive, if that's what you tend to do. In those 6 seconds, your brain is unlikely to be working in a clever way, so any decisions that you make are not likely to be the best that you could make, including what you might say. So you need to practice finding things that stop you reacting or becoming aggressive in those 6 seconds. It helps if you learn to do these automatically. You need to put at least a 6-second gap between whatever triggered you to become angry and any kind of reaction. Remember, aggressive outbursts nearly always make situations worse, and some people struggle not to become aggressive more than others. These are the kinds of things some people do to stop themselves reacting immediately or aggressively once their anger has been triggered. When you first recognise that you are angry, you could tell yourself firmly that you can react in a clever way. Count down from 10. You could close your eyes while you do that. Focus on what is happening inside your body. This can stop you acting outwardly. Breathe slowly and deeply. This will calm you. Turn your head away or walk away from the situation if you can. Think of a happy memory. Force yourself to smile. This sounds odd, but it can change your emotional state. Try it and see. And there are some more ideas on this picture. You might like to stop the video and consider which ones would work best for you if you needed to cool down before you reacted when you were angry. This might be surprising to people who easily become aggressive when they are angry, but another way people express anger is by what we call being passive or showing indirect anger. If we do nothing about whatever made us angry, this is a passive response. If we moan about whatever made us angry, but we don't actually do anything to try and sort it out, or if we would say we would do something but feel angry about having to do it, and then we look really grumpy all the time that we're doing it, that is an indirect angry response. These responses mean that nothing gets sorted, and it can keep us angry about the situation for longer than we need it to. These kinds of responses can also make us feel a bit angry with ourselves if we just put up with whatever it was that has triggered our anger. The best way to respond to something that has triggered our anger is to be assertive. Being assertive takes practice, and sometimes it can be very difficult to be assertive in the heat of the moment. Sometimes it makes sense to go and talk to people assertively a while after whatever happened that triggered your anger, so that you have had time to think about the situation and what you need to say. This is especially true if the situation is a bit complicated. Being assertive is a smart response to getting angry. It's about stating clearly and calmly what you need to happen without upsetting the person that you need to tell this to. It certainly does not involve becoming aggressive, as this nearly always upsets other people. Being assertive doesn't always work to sort everything out, but it is the response that has the best chance of sorting things. So, for example, if someone pushed in front of you when you were lining up for lunch, you could say calmly and assertively, "When people push in front of me in the queue, I feel angry. I need you to get in line like everyone else." Getting good at managing our responses to anger, which includes being assertive, can create positive change. Remember, an assertive response can include saying what happened, how it made you feel, and what you need to happen to put things right. Can you think of assertive responses to the following situations? A friend leaves you out of a game. Someone borrows something and returns it broken. An adult tells you off for something you didn't do. You'll need to stop the video to think about these. Another thing I will say about anger is that sometimes some people, especially boys, become aggressive when in actual fact they're feeling upset, helpless or vulnerable. Rather than ask for help or admit that they can't cope, they become aggressive. This can also be true of people who are not men or boys as well. Because boys and men are often told that they need to be tough, man up, be in control and not talk about their feelings, they can end up thinking that showing that they are upset means they are weak. This is simply not true. It actually takes more strength to be honest and admit when you are upset or need help than just ignoring your needs. But sadly, for some boys, whatever they are really feeling, all they end up showing is aggression, as they think this is the only expression of emotion they are allowed to show because they believe it makes them look tough. This doesn't help them or anyone else. Now let's think about when somebody else is angry. How should we respond? Well, when we see somebody who's angry, it usually triggers strong emotions in us. It's meant to. We can be quite scared of somebody when they're angry. If we think that somebody's angry for a good or justified reason, we tend to be sympathetic and supportive of that person. But if we're confused about why they're angry, or their anger is aimed at us, we tend to be less sympathetic and we try less hard to understand. So although anger is an emotion that seems to be about warning people off, we can still try to understand what is bothering the person who is angry, and this can then mean we might be able to help. When people are angry, they often need to feel heard and like someone has really listened. Angry people do usually calm down quite quickly if they feel like they have been listened to. They might want to talk about what has triggered their anger after they've calmed down and work out a solution to the difficulties they are having. They might want either reassurance that whatever triggered their anger won't happen again, or be helped to understand why whatever triggered their anger needed to happen. So what are the main things we know about anger? Well, we know that it's usually triggered because our well-being has been threatened in some way. We know that if we respond aggressively when we're angry, this rarely sorts anything out and it usually makes situations worse. So we need to learn ways to cool down before we respond. It's also appropriate to try and see things from another person's point of view if they're involved in a situation that triggered our anger. Quite often, if we just ask further questions, we find out information that sorts the situation out. Communication or further communication often does sort things out. Another thing to know about anger that's quite important is that unless we want to keep being angry over and over again, we need to work out what needs to happen to sort out the situation that triggered our anger. Sometimes we can do that immediately in the moment, and sometimes we need to go away and think about it before we try to sort it out. And the last thing I think that is important to know is that when we've worked out what we need to happen to sort the situation out, it's much better if we ask for it assertively rather than aggressively. Let's look at an example of someone getting angry. To make it easier to imagine, let's pretend it's you. Here goes. The school football coach tells you that you can no longer come to football practice because you kicked someone in practice that week, even though you did it because the other person had kicked you first, but the coach didn't see that. This triggers you to become angry because you love football. The first thing to do is recognise you are angry and not react immediately. If you became aggressive, this would just make the football coach believe it was the right decision not to let you come to football practice. If you felt yourself becoming aggressive, you would need to stop it using strategies like breathing deeply or walking away. When you are calm, that's the time to try and sort things out and do some problem solving. Start by asking yourself what you need or want. This seems like it should be obvious, but sometimes when we are angry, it can be hard to work out what we want because we are just too busy being angry with the person who we believe triggered the anger. In this example, we might have unhelpful thoughts like, "I hate the coach," or "it was just so unfair." These thoughts will also trigger you to become angrier and certainly won't sort anything out. More helpful thinking would be about working out that you would like to be allowed back to football practice and to ask yourself what would be the best way to persuade the coach to allow you back. Being aggressive would certainly not make the coach invite you back. A more helpful behaviour would be to explain clearly and assertively to the coach that you kicked someone because they had just kicked you, but that you did understand this was still a mistake. You could explain that not being allowed to come to practice makes you feel devastated. You would need to say how much you would want to be allowed back to practice and talk about what you would change to make it much less likely that you would hurt anyone else again. It still might not work, but it's more likely to work than if you became aggressive. Every situation that triggers your anger will be different, but it's important to remember being aggressive is unlikely to sort the situation out, and that with some situations, some problem solving needs to happen a little later when you feel a bit less angry. So to recap in a slightly different way, when something has triggered you to become angry, if you struggle to manage your anger, you most importantly need to firstly recognise you are angry and secondly avoid becoming aggressive. Those are your first two steps. Most people can do this, but for some it takes practice. The next stage can happen when you feel calm. The next stage is about trying to address what made you angry. Sometimes things are sorted out instantly when you are immediately assertive, but sometimes you need to go away and think about things before you try to sort them. To think about a situation that does not seem very straightforward or quick to sort out, it can be helpful to ask yourself, what triggered your anger? What are you actually angry about? Then you can look at your thoughts. What angry thoughts are you having towards anyone else involved? Can you change your thoughts to be more helpful and to help you feel less angry? Can you try to see things from other people's point of view? Next, you can ask, what do you want or need to happen? What might help the situation out? Who do you need to talk to help sort out the situation? Can you explain how you feel? This can sometimes help people understand your side of the story and help them empathise with you. And have you worked out how you would try to prevent the situation from happening again? Occasionally, though, when we are angry, there is absolutely nothing we can do to change the situation. When this is the case, we need to work out how we can think differently about the situation to prevent our anger being triggered again. This picture might seem complicated, but the basic rule is, if you don't manage immediately to sort out the situation that triggered your anger, it's time to go away and think about it and come up with a plan. So what have we learned? We've learned that anger is normal. We've learnt that aggression nearly always is unhelpful. And we've learnt that managing anger well can end up with positive change.